What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Deceptilab, and welcome to Volume 3 of my Art of War series. And in regards to war, there's one common mistake I see from players, and that mistake is pretty consistent for players of all levels. Granted, the reasons and the results for this particular mistake may vary from player to player. There's one pattern that I've noticed that can be potentially game changing if simplified and done correctly. However, I'm going to discuss some ways to make it even easier and hopefully stop you from making preventable mistakes. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about scouting, and I'll even include a couple of hacks that might help you scout faster and more efficiently. I'll tell you how right after this. All right, guys. So, my first bit of advice that I have for you in regards to scouting for wars is just to gather as much intel as you can as possible. And so, I look at this through one of two ways, and I'll explain to you the reasons why here in a moment. But the first way I like to go to gather intel is I actually like to look at replays. And you'd be surprised how many players don't know that if you go in here into your war screen and you click on the numbers, like if anybody goes in front of you, you know what I'm saying? If anybody on your team actually makes a war attack before you, you can actually look at their war replay by clicking on the number that's right next to that particular base. Like right now, I'm scouting out base 2, and I can see all of my teammates who made war attacks. And if I click on their name, I can actually see their replay. So one thing that I strongly suggest you do is early on when you're if you're new to an alliance or if you're just new to trying to scout this way, take a look at as many replays as possible early on so then you can get a feel for other players within your alliance who use similar war teams and tactics that you do. So if they go before you, then you can actually see, okay, well, this is how they did it, and this is what works, this is what didn't work. Um, in many cases, me personally, if I drop points for any reason, I like to share the replays of when I actually lost so people can look at that also and say, hey, maybe I shouldn't do that. All right. So the other way that I like to, and I'm gonna go back to the main battle screen real quick. One of the other ways that I like to go about scouting is I like to do a lot of war rooms. And if you're not familiar, typically war rooms are set up for many of the more competitive alliances. And I'll tell you how mine's works. I won't actually share what it looks like inside our war room, but I'll tell you the concept. And basically, what it is we have one room set up for each base. So right now I'm on base 2. I can go to my line app and go and look at base 2, and someone will have a screenshot of basically it'll just give me different intel. And so it works a couple of different ways. I think the minimum requirements you should have will be a picture of the base. You want to know where the mine placement is. You want to know which outpost bots are on that base and in which position, so that you can try to plan your attack accordingly. Uh, Based on the outpost bots, and also to include the combiner outpost. So you want to know who's in your combiner outpost as well. In this particular case, well, in most cases, you're going to have Computron or Lyle Kaiser in there, and so you want to know ahead of time, hey, there's a risk that my entire team gets hacked if I go to this particular section of the base. And it's not just then, like even like an Optimus Maximus and Bruticus who have recently got buffs. It could be something as simple as not wanting to get stunned by those rockets, so knowing that's happening ahead of time. So um, I feel like you're doing a disservice to your alliances if you're playing in competitive wars if you don't use these war rooms. Some people, like we use Line App, a lot of people will just do theirs on Discord. And to be honest, one of the things that I think that when you are joining an alliance, you need to know how they communicate primarily, just for the sole reason and knowing, because there's a lot of players that's like, I'm not getting an additional app to play a game. Well, maybe you don't need to be in a top tier alliance. Um, if that's the case, because I guarantee you that most of them use these types of war chats and go over strategies and tactics. So yeah, that's gonna be my first tip on effective scouting. The second step I want to talk about in regards to scouting is going to be knowing your problematic power cores. And so what I've actually done is made a graphic. So, and this is not an all-inclusive list, but these are some of the main ones that I look for defensively um, while I'm on the attacking side. So I look at the defenders to see if they have any of these power cores. So just part of the list you can see, and I'll leave it up for a little bit so you can screenshot. But I like to look for the new Prime Core they have, the Liege Maximo, just so you make sure that your team's not getting hacked unnecessarily. Obviously, if you're getting hacked, then, or if there's the risk of you getting hacked, then that's going to be where you want to kind of prioritize targeting that particular defense. The motion sensing mines, particularly for those of you who are going for any kind of sack strategy or anything like that, just to make sure that you can actually use your abilities because before that bot dies. The force field disruptor for anyone who is has any kind of shields, or in the case of cutthroat and tracks, if they have put down smoke, you don't want to use an ability on something that's going to disappear. And then if you're using lightning rod, if you see defense has lightning rod when you're using some of your electrical attacks. And then one of the big ones that I've seen, I see people use zone heal defensively, and what I noticed a pattern of is people trying to use spam attacks on certain areas of the base that are affected by zone heal. And so what that causes is it causes you to use more attacks as the base regenerates itself in that particular area. Target protocol, if you got gunners, you want to prioritize those just because you know it's going to take them down faster by targeting them with by the use of the mortars. And then Micronus core is kind of the same thing as I was talking about with Zone Hill. You want to make sure that you take those areas down quickly because otherwise they'll regenerate. And then we get the new core to the game, the Ray Blocker core, which is also going to just stop any healing that you've got going on your base until that build bot is taken out. So like I said, not an all-inclusive list, but we'll actually go back to the battlefield and we'll look at an example on this B2 of how I process the cores for that base. All right, so in my current war against one Solus, you can actually see what the base 2 looks like. And so this is one I didn't mention on that list, but the high frequency suppressor, if you're one of those guys that likes to try to hack a particular area, so if you have something like a dirge going in there or any kind of hacker bombshell, for example, then you don't want to use that in the area that's shown right there, which is going to bring me to another point that I'll talk about in a little bit, but it's knowing your ranges for each individual area. All right, so you got that. And we were talking about the target protocol. So I have two gunners on my team. So what I'm looking at here is I'm seeing these two areas staggered out with target protocols. And so I'm gonna need to get to each one of those and prioritize them. Now the bottom one I'm not overly concerned about because I figure I'll get that easily just through regular walk. But I do expect to get held up here a little bit by the combiner, you know, the two outpost bots, so on and so forth. I mean, and even when that choke point gets created, you know, these high velocity shells will also possibly present a problem because they're going to be one of those power cores that's going to attack my entire team. Not necessarily I'm going to prioritize that unless I see something in battle that dictates that I should go after that a little bit faster. So as it stands, I think that I'm going to be okay with this base, and we'll actually take a base attempt here. Looking at where the outposts are positioned, I actually think I'm going to actually go sack on this one just because I got Flame War. And knowing the ranges here, I think if I go after this shock tower right here, I should be able to pop all four outposts and the combiner outpost. So I'll jump out of the camera real quick and I will make my war attempt on base 2. All right, so this is typically what I use for my war team. In this particular case, I'm going to take Blot out. I'm going to put Flame War in. And if you saw Volume 1, one of the things I was talking about was team build. And with team build, one of the things that I was saying is you want to put these guys in the correct order. By doing that, you make it easy on yourself to go in there and make random changes to your team as deemed necessary. Now, in this particular case, I'm fighting in Cybertron League right now. I'm not going to carry a combiner with me in this particular case, based on the war call. But I'll drop Flame War right down here in the middle, and as discussed earlier, I'm going to hit that shock tower, and I'm going to pop, well, right now 3 outposts. Let's see if I can get a 4th, and I got the 4th. We can see Defensor down there. And with those outpost bots being popped, I can now go after these outpost bots and then just work my way up the battlefield as I see appropriate. And it's actually going to make things pretty easy. I'll go ahead and complete this attempt, this war attempt. But right now I'm keeping myself out of the range of some of the things that are going to be more hurtful to my team. Now I am going to have to take a look here at Smokescreen. Smokescreen is actually causing me a lot of damage, which I actually missed it first while I was talking to you guys. So now I already lost a healer. But if I make him a priority, get him down early. So these are the kind of things that I'm talking about. So I actually made a huge mistake here because I was so busy talking. But either way, I think I should be good. Now I don't have any FFDs here, so I can go ahead and throw down some smoke to protect myself to kind of cover up the fact that I made a mistake earlier. And as you guys know, I've been using the concept of individual healing to make sure that I'm protected at all times, which will really help me when I look at these MDS, because I got a laser MDS at the top that's hitting multiple of my war team members at one time. So even with the large mistakes that I made, I was able to mask those up and go ahead and get the victory here. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the other areas that I like to look at when scouting is I like to look at the ranges of all the different defenses. So I actually take a look at this base 3 here. And what I want to actually look at is we'll actually go through everything really quickly. So right out the gate, I see there's a Micronus core here. It's on an MDS. So I'm going to, and I'm looking at, one thing I want to point out is this. You can't actually see the range of the actual defense until you get on the battlefield. So for these prime cores, it's a very good practice to know the ranges ahead of time, or to take a second and look at the auras that show around these as you actually select the battle. So I can see that there is a force field disruptor here, which for me, I carry cutthroat. That can be a problem. And there's another FFD right here, which I'm not overly concerned about because there's not that much on the front half of this base. So the key thing I'm looking for here is that Liege Maximal core. I want to stay outside of that range and then probably take it out with a one-shot kill so that I can proceed without my team hacking itself. So I'll jump out of the screen again. We'll take another war attempt. All right, so let's see. This time I'm not going to use Flame War. I'm going to go back to Blot. And I'm actually going to take a combiner with me this time. I'll take Galvatronus. And we will enter a hard mode battle. The biggest thing here, like I said, is getting rid of that Micronus core early. And so later on in this series, we'll talk about bot deployment. But when you go look at this laser turret and you look at the aura around it, that's going to be the range of where your Leech Maximal Core or the defense Leech Maximal Core is going to have its area of effect. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and start down here at the bottom, and I'll just take it out with Blast Off, knowing that it's going to one-shot kill that defense. None of my team gets hacked, and we'll just resume our walk up the battlefield. Now in this case, FFD is present, but I'm not overly concerned. I feel like I can take out this front half relatively quickly. Impactor gets down there, and I'll get him to regenerate himself. And there's a little bit of a split here for my team, which I try to avoid. But ultimately, what I want to do is I want to pop these outpost bots. So I'm going to use Blot out there to pop all 4 outpost bots because they're way too close together. And it's going to pop their combiner outpost. This is when I'm going to bring my combiner, go ahead and use my beam from Tripticon to wear down the opposing Titan. And then I'll let Galvatronus deal with these guys for a little bit. So I like to start off with his ability. I'm not going to talk too much about the combiner because I want to talk about that in a later part of the series. But one thing I do want to emphasize now is that if at all possible, try to bring that combiner away from your team. Now, I waited a little bit too long, not really a problem. And here's where I'll use Knockout to try to whittle down those defenders faster. And then my individual healing is kicking in, so all these guys are having pretty decent health with the exception of my healer. So I'll go ahead and throw down a healing grenade for it. And then I already mentioned earlier that MDS up there has Micronus, and so I'm going to use, well, I actually took it out. I was using Knockout because he has an acid attack, to take away the additional healing from that Micronus core. But I took out the MDS, even better. And base 3 is going to come down with all 8 of my bots still on the battlefield. All right, so one last step that I want to talk about is I want to talk about your MDS variants and the importance of understanding what they do. So one key thing is a lot of times right now we don't have any Prime League war effects that affect the MDS, but a lot of times we do. It could be like in the past meta, it was sharks coming out of your plasma cannon, which really caused a lot of people issues. And one of the things that I want to point out is the Titan effects that you're going to have as well. And so I'm going to go into the lab for a second, and I actually need to jump out of the camera screen so you can see. But Tripticon is going to have this active Titan base effect right now. That's going to allow your beam lasers, laser guns, and point defense beams to deal 30% more damage. And your outpost bots and your combiners also deal more beam damage. So when scouting and looking at the different types of outpost bots, you need to keep that in mind also. And so it's very good practice to just keep up with your Titan effects overall as a whole. So we're going to take that information and we're going to go into base 4. And we're going to do a little bit of scouting. So starting to tie together a lot of the things we already been talking about. You've got a Bleach Maximal Core right there on a mortar, which mortar is one of those things that's going to have a tech tree effect. It's going to give it a little bit more, it's going to have a little bit more resistance, a little bit more health. So, but for me, this is still going to be in one-shot range with blast off. So I may use it, I may use a combiner. I need to gauge the range when I first get up here. FFD going to be a problem for me again. But here, what I see is this high velocity shells, level 20 in the middle, but level 1 on this side. So I'll probably actually attack from the stronger side first, just so I can get that down faster. Um, Now I did go look at a replay, and I know that Computron is over here in the post, in the out on the combiner outpost, and around here I believe it was, I saw Swoop in one of the outposts out here. I think I should be able to pop most of them at the one time, at the same time. But like I said, you need to know who all of your outpost bots are, and you need to know essentially where they're located if you are not going to pop all of them at one time, particularly. The other thing that I didn't mention, I said you need to get a good grasp on all 5 build bots in their cores, because those build bot cores are some of the most powerful cores in the game, and so that's why I always try to seek all of those out. So I see it's a zone hill, looks like behind HQ. It's a zone hill up here near the HQ on the right hand side. We already pointed out a FFD. You know, this one right here for the lightning rod, I'm not overly concerned about because I don't use electrical attacks on my current war team build, and the same thing with the hack cores. So we'll go ahead and we'll take a crack at that as well. And I'll use my base war team for this one. While I'm talking about that, one of the common mistakes that I see, and I talked about this earlier in team build, is like not actually changing out your team build. And when I get onto the battlefield, because I feel comfortable using my base war team here, the primary thing I want to look at is this Liege Maximal Core and its effective range. So I can see through that aura that right around that Cabana outpost is when I'm going to need to worry about that. So just before I get to that outpost is where I need to take action. And I'm just going to normal deploy my bots. Now I kind of used a bad habit here of deploying the whole team. I typically do that when I'm not overly concerned about the front half of a base. But I am going to take down that FFD. And I'm just going to let the team just walk up. Now I've got Computron about to pop out. I'm going to try to go use Blot there. It's not going to work because I'm out of range. So it's actually a really, really good front half base design there. But I'm not taking that hack, so I'll just go ahead and I'll use my combiner. I got Swoop to pop out, so that was, I told you guys earlier, that was my primary concern. And I'm going to start working on the back half of this base with Galvatronus's ability, his 4-star ability, and try to see what I can take down early. Now, the way this is set up, the way this is going so far, in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and take out the shield generator with the Titan. Try to get as much of the back half down as possible. So once I clear out the front, I'm good to go. Now keep in mind that I do still have a couple of outposts back there. I got my outpost bots approaching. In this case, I got Blaster with his minions. And so I got a real good opportunity here to just use Knockout to just get him off of the battlefield as fast as possible. And considering that his minions will die when he dies, I'm going to target him directly. And right now, there's not a whole lot that I'm concerned about. I got Computron down pretty quickly. So right now, I'm starting to look more at the MDS. And I'm also watching my Titan battle in the back. Right now, I'm losing, so I'm going to use one of my abilities on the Titan itself to make sure I stay ahead of that battle. Now I'm running into a little bit of trouble up here in the top left hand corner with that laser MDS, just because I did run into those motion sensing mines, which I did check out earlier. My goal was to try to get Blot to pop the remaining outposts. That didn't happen yet, so my backup plan is going to be as my team approaches to go throw down that cutthroat smoke. And right now, I've got Impactor kind of out there on the front. And I'll just throw down some smoke for my team to keep them protected. And we shouldn't have a problem here at all. And even though I'll end up being at the point where I was losing the Titan battle, he's still in a good position to because of how quickly I got through the base. It became a non-factor. So that's one of the things I look at too, is how quickly do I think I can get a base down, just so I can know how to utilize my Titan and its attacks, whether I want to use them on the base or whether I want to use them elsewhere. And I'm going to go ahead and throw in my 5-star Overlord. It's a good habit to have when you're fighting against commander bases. Take your best combiner that you got. In this particular case, I did some scouting earlier, and I think I can get away with a Ramjet sack. So I'm going to swap him in for block. And because I know the mine locations, what I'm going to end up doing, and you'll see it all come together at the end, but what I'm going to do with the mine locations is I'm going to basically run Ramjet shorter than I normally would to avoid having him have any effects from those motion sensing mines. So I'll jump out of the camera. You can see this Liege Maximo up here, so I have to be careful about that. But as I look at the front half of the base, nothing really striking any fear in my heart. So everything that I'm worried about is on the back half of that base. So I'm going to essentially end up walking the front half. I'm going to run Ramjet short, and I'll probably trip an MSM. But my target, if you look at where all of the outposts are located, if I go to this build bot, I should be able to pop quite a bit of outpost and also the combiner outpost, get that process started. I actually was able to get, looks like all 4 of them. And even though I got hacked with Ramjet being the sacrifice bot, I'm not overly concerned. I'm just going to let Computron ability run, and then I'm going to start my frontline bots out here to essentially wear everybody down, and I'll use knockout to help finish that job up front. And meanwhile, I'll go ahead and take my attack. Now I am taking some stun here from swoop, not overly concerned about it because of my regeneration right now. And I did have Nemesis Prime kind of jump out front, so I'm going to use his ability to shield my healer and himself because he's got the ability 11, and Computron should come down pretty easy. My focus now becomes making sure that I don't get hacked by that Liege Maximal Core on that left hand mortar, which I can't reach yet for a one-shot kill. But like I said before, I did gauge its range, and so as I get closer, I'm going to get that one-shot kill early, and make sure that that's not a problem for me going forward. Now, because there's beam damage, like I talked about earlier, I'm going to one-shot kill one of the beam lasers. And to be honest, just for good measure, I'll throw my combiner in. And if I lose a Titan battle, I'm going to reserve his 5-star ability just in case I need it to make the final blow on the Titan. But I don't think that's going to be the case. But it does help him survive longer. So yeah, I actually made it. So now that I know that their Titan's going to die, I'm going to go ahead and use that 5-star ability so that I can reflect damage back to everything that's shooting at me. And we'll just speed through this. Now, in this particular case, I'm running a little low on time. But once the combiner gets down, the team is going to clean the rest of this up, so I'm not overly concerned. And I still got it with about 25 seconds to spare. But yeah, man, like, so that's volume 3 of my series. I'm gonna head back to the Deceptilab for a second. And I'm probably gonna do. I know I'm gonna do at least one more volume of the series. I might wind up doing 5. So if it's anything that you want to see added, just let me know, and I can get it installed before we close this series out. But other than that, look for the volume 4 to come out later on this week. And yeah, just keep up the valiant efforts in the wars, guys.